Hi, this is gonna be the video or series of videos which are going to be the discussion of William Lane Craig and J.P. Moreland and their writing discussing the actual Kalam Cosmological argument. This argument is the word Kalam. The word Kalam comes from Islamic scholasticism. That very beginning sort of school of philosophy of scholasticism that was Islamic. And this essentially had to do with a lot of what was going on here had to do with the Islamists that actually had this kind of argument and mentality that of the whole first cause type of thing. Now, I just want to sincerely apologize if I mess anything up. But yeah, I just want to say that. I'm not going to say why I might mess up, but I just But anyway, the argument itself. Premise 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Okay, down here in the this description, I'm going to put down there a few discussions that are just William Lane Craig. William Lane Craig is a great Christian apologist, and he wrote this book with J.P. Moreland, it's a very thick book, but I plan on getting into it. But I'm going to put a few links down here that lead to a few lectures that are by William Lane Craig that have to do with his idea of the Kalam Cosmological argument. First premise: whatever begins to exist has a cause. Premise 2: the universe began to exist. Premise 3: therefore the universe has a cause. First of all, after he lays this out, he goes through a few objections. One objection, he says, this objection, however, is he talks about premise 1 seems obviously true, at the least more so than its negation. It is rooted in the metaphysical intuition that something cannot come to being from nothing. Moreover, this premise is constantly confirmed in our experience. Nevertheless, a number of atheists, in order to avoid the argument's conclusion, have denied the first premise. The first premise being whatever begins to exist has a cause. Sometimes it is said that quantum physics furnishes an exception to premise 1, since on the subatomic level, events are said to be uncaused according to the so-called Copenhagen interpretation. In the same way, certain theories of cosmic origins are interpreted as showing that the whole universe could have sprung into being out of the subatomic vacuum. Thus, the universe is said to be the proverbial free lunch. This objection, however, is based on misunderstandings. In the first place, not all scientists agree that these subatomic events are uncaused. A great many physicists today are quite dissatisfied with the Copenhagen interpretation of subatomic physics, and are exploring deterministic theories like that of David Bohm. Thus, subatomic physics is not a proven exception to premise 1. Second, even on the traditional indeterministic interpretation, particles do not come into being out of nothing. That is the main objection to this idea of the subatomic vacuum of the Copenhagen interpretation. Even though we're talking about a vacuum here, vacuum being a place where there are no particles, that has to do with particles existing some other place besides the vacuum itself. Thus, subatomic physics is not a proven exception to premise 1. Second, even on the traditional indeterministic interpretation, particles do not come into being out of nothing. They arise as spontaneous fluctuations of the energy contained in the subatomic vacuum, which constitutes an indeterministic cause of their origination. Third, the same point can be made about theories of the origin of the universe out of a primordial vacuum. Popular magazine articles touching such theories as getting something from nothing simply do not understand that the vacuum is not nothing, but rather a sea of fluctuating energy endowed with a rich structure and subject to physical laws. Thus, there is no basis for the claim that quantum physics proves that things can begin to exist without a cause, much less that the universe could have sprung into being uncaused from literally nothing. Now, that's the first premise being whatever begins to exist has a cause. This is a premise that doesn't really have it mostly comes from metaphysical ideas. Whatever begins to exist has a cause is something that its negation cannot work. It goes back to the Leibnizian idea. Something cannot. No, I mean not the Leibnizian idea. That's different. It just goes back to the idea that can something come from nothing, and that idea itself runs into problems because there is a lot of absurdity in asking whether something can come out of nothing or not. And then we have another objection. Other critics have said that premise 1 is true only for things in the universe, but it is not true of the universe itself. But the argument's defender may reply that this objection misconstrues the nature of the premise. Premise 1 does not see merely a physical law like the law of gravity or the laws of thermodynamics, which are valid for things within the universe. Premise 1 is not a physical principle. Rather, premise 1 is a metaphysical principle. Being cannot come from non-being. Something cannot come into existence uncaused from nothing. The principle therefore applies to all of reality and is thus metaphysically absurd that the universe should pop into being uncaused out of nothing. This response seems quite reasonable, for on the atheistic view, there is not even the potentiality of the universe's existence prior to the Big Bang, since nothing is prior to the Big Bang. But then, how could the universe become actual if there was not even the potentiality of its existence? It makes much more sense to say that the potentiality of the universe lay in the power of God to create it. Recently, some critics of the Kalam Cosmological argument have denied that in the beginning to exist, the universe became actual or came into being. They thereby focus attention on the theory of time underlying the Kalam Cosmological argument. On a static or so-called B theory of time, according to which all moments of time are equally existent, the universe does not in fact come into being or become actual at the Big Bang. It just exists tenselessly as a four-dimensional space-time block that can be finitely extended in the earlier than direction. If time is tenseless, then the critics are right that the universe never really comes into being, and therefore the quest for a cause of its coming into being is misconceived. Although Leibniz's question, why is there tenselessly something rather than nothing, should still rightly be asked, there would be no reason to look for a cause of the universe's being to exist. Since on tenseless theories of time, the universe did not truly begin to exist by virtue of its having a first event, any more than a meteor stick begins to exist by virtue of its having a first centimeter. In affirming that things which have begun to exist need a cause, the proposition of the proponent of the Kalam Cosmological argument assumes the following understanding of that notion, where X ranges over any entity and T ranges over times, whether instants or moments of non-zero finite duration. A. X begins to exist at T if and only if X comes into being at T. So X being the ranges over any entity and is thus spatially, T ranges over times and is temporal. B. X comes into being at T if and only if 1. X exists at T and the actual world includes no state of affairs at which X exists timelessly. 2. T is either the first time at which X exists or separated from any T prime is less than T at which X existed by an interval during which X does not exist. And 3, the important one, X's existing at time is a tense fact. The key clause is B is 3. By presupposing a dynamic or so-called A theory of time according to which temporal being is real, the proponent of the Kalam cosmological argument justifiably assumes that the universe is existing at that first moment of time represents the moment at which the universe came into being. Thus, the real issue separating the proponent of the Kalam cosmological argument and critics of the first premise is the objectivity of tense and temporal become. Okay, the first premise: whatever begins to exist has a cause. Now, I think what he's saying here, these objections that he is visiting, he has shown, I think, very well and very successfully to show that they don't really show that something can exist without there being a cause for it. Now, I think even with the whole idea of the subatomic physics, that I find the most interesting in all these objections. The whole idea of the subatomic vacuum and stuff like that. That even though there are no particles in it, even though there are no particles in a vacuum, and it's there are no like particles or actual beings in it. That still has to do with particles causing the certain vacuum to be caused. Premise 2, the universe began to exist, has been supported by both deductive philosophical arguments and inductive scientific arguments. The first of 4 arguments, so this is a big deal here. The first of 4 arguments for this premise that we will consider is the argument based on the impossibility of the existence of an actual infinite. And it may be formulated as follows: 1. An actual finite cannot exist, occupying a non-zero finite temporal interval that was absolutely first, that is, not preceded by an equal interval. Premise 1 asserts then that an actual infinite cannot exist in the real spatial-temporal world. It is usually alleged that this sort of argument has been invalidated by Georg Cantor's work on the actual infinite and by subsequent developments in set theory. But this allegation misconstrues the nature of both Cantor's system and modern set theory, for the argument does not in fact contradict a single tenet of either. The reason is this: Cantor's system and set theory are simply a universe of discourse, a mathematical system based on certain adopted axioms and conventions. The argument's defender may hold that while the actual infinite may be a fruitful and consistent concept within the postulated universe of discourse, it cannot be transposed into the spatial-temporal world. For this would involve some counterintuitive absurdities. This can be shown by concrete examples that illustrate the various absurdities that would result if an actual infinite were to be instantiated in the real world. Now, this is talking about an actual infinite. An actual infinite is this is a pretty big topic that is discussed in philosophy of mathematics. This is something that is infinite in either time or space or something like that, but it's infinite in some certain sort of a way. I want to go back into the definition of an actual infinite. First of all, let's go back to this argument. This is an argument based on the impossibility of the existence of an actual infinite. One, an actual infinite cannot exist. Two, an infinite temporal regress of physical events is an actual infinite. Now, this is where it's really important here. An infinite temporal regress of physical events is an actual infinite. Now, the Kalam Cosmological argument is this: whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. What I'd like to note quickly there is that the Kalam cosmological argument does not say that this cause is God. The Leibnizian argument points to God immediately. That's what I've noted as to be a slippery slope, as does Craig and Moreland. Well, they don't use the word slippery slope, but they say that premise two of their formulation of the Leibnizian argument, of the Leibnizian cosmological argument, is false. But this I find to be important here, because premise one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Whatever begins to exist, the universe began to exist. Now, the universe began to exist, and whatever begins to exist has a cause. These two premises are important as to discuss whether this actual infinite has absurdities or not. Now, in this discussion, there's a couple little things. One, there's a couple little illustrations of the idea of an actual infinite, or of infinity in actuality. One is the first one is which actually comes later than the second one I'll talk about, is from David Hilbert. David Hilbert was a really intelligent mathematician, and he was a great philosopher of mathematics. He was he formed the Hilbert system, which is very important to the philosophy of mathematics, and he created the biggest movement. The Hilbert system was the biggest movement of the big three. The big three in the later philosophy of mathematics beyond Kant and Mill is logicism, formalism, and intuitionism. David Hilbert was the biggest formalist. His system was a tweak. Was a little bit of a tweak on formalism, but it was formalism itself. But anyway, Hilbert's hotel is the example which is going to show, hopefully, that there is absurdity in the idea of an actual infinite. Take, for example, Hilbert's Hotel, a product of the mind of the great German mathematician David Hilbert. As a warm-up, let us first imagine a hotel with a finite number of rooms. A finite number of rooms. Suppose, furthermore, that all the rooms are full. When a new guest arrives asking for a room, the proprietor apologizes, "Sorry, all the rooms are full," and that is the end of the story. But now let us imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, and suppose once more that all of the rooms are full. An infinite number of rooms, and all the rooms are full. There is not a single vacant room throughout the entire infinite hotel. Now suppose a new guest shows up asking for a room. "But of course," says the proprietor, and he immediately shifts the person in room 1 into room 2, and the person in room 2 into room 3, the person in room 3 into room 4, and so on out to infinity. As a result of these room changes, room number 1 now becomes vacant, and a new guest gratefully checks in. But remember, before he arrived, all the rooms were full. Equally curious, according to the mathematicians, there are now no more persons in the hotel than there were before. The number is just infinite. But how can this be? The proprietor just added the new guest name to the register and gave him his keys. How can there not be one more person in the hotel than before? But the situation becomes even stranger. For suppose an infinity of new guests show up at the desk asking for a room. Of course, says the proprietor, and he proceeds to shift to the person in room 1 into room 2, the person in room 2 into room 4, the person in room 3 into room 6, and so on out to infinity, always putting each former occupant into the room number twice his own. Because any natural number multiplied by 2 always equals an even number. All the guests wind up in an even numbered rooms. As a result, all the odd numbered rooms become vacant, and the infinity of new guests is easily accommodated. And yet, before they came, all the rooms were full. And again, strangely enough, the number of guests in the hotel is the same after infinity of the new guests check in as before, even though there was as many guests as old guests. In fact, the proprietor could repeat the process infinitely many times, and yet there would never be one single person more in the hotel than before. But Hilbert's Hotel is even stranger than the German mathematician made it out to be. For suppose some of the guests start to check out. Suppose the guest in room 1 departs. Is there not now one fewer person in the hotel? Not according to the mathematicians. Suppose the guests in rooms 1, 3, and 5, etc. check out. In this case, an infinite number of people have left the hotel, but according to the mathematicians, there are no fewer people in the hotel. In fact, we could have every other guest check out of the hotel and repeat the process infinitely many times, and yet there would never be any fewer people in the hotel. Now suppose the proprietor doesn't like having a half-empty hotel. It looks bad for business. No matter, but by shifting occupants as before, but in reverse order, he transforms his half-vacant hotel into one that is jammed to the gills. You might think that by these maneuvers, the proprietor could always keep this strange hotel fully occupied. But you'd be wrong. For suppose that the person in rooms 4, 5, 6, etc. checked out. At a single stroke, the hotel will be virtually emptied. The guest register would be reduced to 3 names, and the infinite would be converted to finitude. And yet, it would remain true that the same number of guests checked out this time as when the guests in rooms 1, 3, and 5 checked out. Can anyone believe that such a hotel could exist in reality? Hilbert's Hotel certainly seems absurd, since nothing hangs on the illustrations involving a hotel. The argument, if successful, would show in general that it is impossible for an actually infinite number of things to exist in spatial-temporal reality. Students sometimes react to such illustrations as Hilbert's Hotel by saying that we really do not understand the nature of infinity, and hence these absurdities result. But this attitude is simply mistaken. Infinite set theory is highly developed and well understood. Is a highly developed and well understood branch of mathematics, and these absurdities can be seen to result precisely because we do understand the notion of a collection with an actually infinite number of members. Sometimes it is said that we can find counterexamples to claim that an actually infinite number of things cannot exist, so the premise 1 must be false. Premise 1 being an actual infinite cannot exist. Sometimes it is said that we can find counterexamples to claim that an actually infinite number of things cannot exist, so that premise 1 must be false. For instance, is not every finite distance capable of being divided into 1/2, 1/4, 1/8 onto infinity? Does that not prove that there are in any finite distance on actually infinite number of parts? The defender of the argument may reply that this objection confuses a potential infinite with an actual infinite. He will point out now this is the difference between a potential infinite and an actual infinite, and the whole idea of Hilbert's Hotel is to show that a actual infinite cannot exist in spatial-temporal reality. The defender of the argument may reply that this objection confuses a potential infinite with an actual infinite. He will point out that while you can continue to divide any distance for as long as you want, such a series is merely potentially infinite. In that infinity serves as a limit that you endlessly approach but never reach. If you assume that any distance but is already composed out of an actually infinite number of parts, then you are begging the question. You are assuming what the objector is supposed to prove, namely that there is a clear counterexample to the claim that an actually infinite number of things cannot exist. Okay, so I want to sort of sum up the whole idea of Hilbert's Hotel. The whole deal is he's trying to look at the whole idea of the Kalam Cosmological argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. That the universe began to exist, and therefore the universe has a cause. And then we have a new set of premises, which is arguing premise 2, the universe began to exist. Which is saying that the universe began to exist, that there's a first existence of the universe rather than an infinite regress of existences in the world, and there was not, causes and metacauses and meta-metacauses and meta-metacauses. Then we have this set of argument. One on actual infinite cannot exist. Another thing I want to try and do here is I want to try and look at another illustration that points to Bertrand Russell. This is a illustration referring to his account of Tristram Shandy. First of all, thus, if the series of past events were the argument, if successful, would show in general that it is impossible for an actually infinite number of things to exist in spatial-temporal reality. Students sometimes react to such illustrations as Hilbert's Hotel by saying that we really do not understand the nature of infinity, and hence these absurdities result. But this attitude is simply mistaken. Infinite set theory is highly developed and well understood. Is a highly developed and well understood branch of mathematics, and these absurdities can be seen to result precisely because we do understand the notion of a collection with an actually infinite number of members. Sometimes it is said that we can find counterexamples to claim that an actually infinite number of things cannot exist. So the premise 1 must be false. Premise 1 being an actual infinite cannot exist. Sometimes it is said that we can find counterexamples to claim that an actually infinite number of things cannot exist. So that premise 1 must be false. For instance, is not every finite distance capable of being divided into 1/2, 1/4, 1/8 onto infinity? Does that not prove that there are in any finite distance an actually infinite number of parts? The defender of the argument may reply that this objection confuses a potential infinite with an actual infinite. He will point out now this is the difference between a potential infinite and an actual infinite, and the whole idea of Hilbert's hotel is to show that a actual infinite cannot exist in spatio-temporal reality. The defender of the argument may reply that this objection confuses a potential infinite with an actual infinite. He will point out that while you can continue to divide any distance for as long as you want, such a series is merely potentially infinite. In that infinity serves as a limit that you endlessly approach but never reach. If you assume that any distance but is already composed out of an actually infinite number of parts, then you are begging the question. You are assuming what the objector is supposed to prove, namely that there is a clear counterexample to the claim that an actually infinite number of things cannot exist. Okay, so I want to sort of sum up the whole idea of Hilbert's hotel. The whole deal is he's trying to look at the whole idea of the Kalam Cosmological argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. That the universe began to exist. That therefore the universe has a cause. And then we have a new set of premises, which is arguing premise 2, the universe began to exist. Which is saying that the universe began to exist, that there's a first existence of the universe rather than an infinite regress of existences in the world, and there was not, causes and metacauses and meta-metacauses and meta-metacauses. Then we have this set of argument. One on actual infinite cannot exist. Another thing I want to try and do here is I want to try and look at another illustration that points to Bertrand Russell. This is a illustration referring to his account of Tristram Shandy. First of all, thus, if the series of past events were beginningless, the present even could not have arrived, which is absurd. Yeah, this argument brings mind to Bertrand Russell's account of Tristram Shandy, who in the novel by Sterne writes his autobiography so slowly that it takes him a whole year to record the events of a single day. Were he mortal, he would never finish, asserts Russell. But if he were immortal, then the entire book could be completed, since to each day there would correspond a year, and both are infinite. Russell's assertion is untenable on an A theory of time. However, since the future is in reality a potential infinite only, though he write forever, Tristram Shandy would only get farther and farther behind, so that instead of finishing his autobiography, he will progressively approach a state in which he would be infinitely far behind, but he would never reach such a state, because the years and hence the days of his life will always be finite in numbers, through indefinitely, though indefinitely increasing. All right. Really, what the whole I mean, I could go over all four of the arguments, because there's four arguments that Craig and Moreland are giving, that are arguing premise 2, that the universe has a cause. And I think, in my opinion, that the idea of Hilbert's Hotel shows that premise 2 is a truth, a definite truth. Because if the universe did not begin to exist, then there's a beginningless existence. Now, there's an idea of a beginningless existence in giving an idea to an omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient God, a God that looks over everything and causes everything, as well as supposedly cause himself. Now, this is what would be viewed as a necessary existence. A necessary existence being a God. But what I'm really interested in thinking about is this premise 2. This premise 2 is very important, because if the universe had a beginningless existence, if the universe never began to exist, then we have a beginningless existence, an existence that goes infinitely back, causes, that each cause is contingent, that each cause is dependent on something else. Each cause is dependent on another cause that caused it, whether it being inferior or an essay. Now, that's a different sort of idea to discuss, whether we're talking the idea of inferior or an essay. The idea of inferior or an essay that actually comes from Thomas Aquinas, and that is used in Thomas arguments. But I just want to assess this. The first premise: whatever begins to exist has a cause. Now, the best objection, like I discussed, is the idea of a subatomic vacuum, that being from the Copenhagen interpretation. Now, Craig and Moreland debunked that little objection as the fact that even though the subatomic vacuum and that whole idea of subatomic physics, even though there's no particles in that vacuum, there's particles that cause that to happen, and that's not and that there are actually a lot of scientists who view the Copenhagen interpretation as not really it doesn't really satisfy them, and I would also agree, because that subatomic vacuum is caused by things that do have particles. Other critics have said that premise 1 is true only for things in the universe, but it is not true of the universe itself. But the argument's defender may reply that this objection misconstrues the nature of the premise. Premise 1 does not state merely a physical law like the law of gravity or the laws of thermodynamics, which are valid for things within the universe. Premise 1 is not a physical principle, but a metaphysical principle. Now, this objection I feel I did not really discuss earlier in this video, but I want to discuss it more depth now with respect to the first premise of the Kalam cosmological argument. There's two different levels, I guess you could think about. There's within the universe. There's the universe itself, and everything in it. And then there's outside of it. Now I guess if one likens the idea of whatever begins to exist has a cause to be a sort of physical law, like the law of gravity or the laws of thermodynamics, that is within the universe itself. Now, Craig and Moreland say that rather premise 1 is a metaphysical principle. Being cannot come from non-being. Something cannot come into existence uncaused from nothing. The principle therefore applies to all of reality, and it is thus metaphysically absurd that the universe should pop into being uncaused out of nothing. This response seems quite reasonable, for on the atheistic view, there was not even the potentiality of the universe's existence prior to the Big Bang. All right, the Big Bang, that's another thing. That's another form. That's a kind of cause. Even though there's problems as to how that happened and stuff like that. But a metaphysical being, if you know what metaphysics is discussions as to it's referring not only to cosmology but to everything about the universe itself rather than in it. A physical principle is something that has to do with the universe and things within it. And a metaphysical principle is not necessarily outside of the universe, but referring to the universe as it is a whole. Referring to the universe as it is. Referring to the universe as it is outside of the bounds of physical principles. And I'm going to have to say that saying whatever begins to exist has a cause, being a metaphysical principle, like he says being cannot come out of non-being. And even if you look at, you can look at all kinds of metaphysics, regardless of whatever metaphysician or whatever metaphysics you're looking at. You cannot see anywhere where a metaphysician makes an argument of how non-being comes from being. You will not ever see that. You will not ever see that, because it's not possible. It creates absurdities just because of logic, not really because of metaphysics itself, because of how absurdity is connoted, because of logic. It's logically fallacious and basically illogical to say that. To say that non-being can come from. Or say that being can come out of non-being. And theist or atheist, everyone will say that, because whether you are holding a theist creationist perspective and are arguing that case, or you're having an atheistic and type of hard science, Big Bang, evolution type of argument, you will always say that things have a cause. Always. You will always agree that things have causes. That whatever exists has a cause. And that, I think, saying that being cannot come from non-being validates a certain section of the principle of sufficient reason. The principle of sufficient reason, as I said in the video that I was talking about the Leibniz cosmological argument, the principle of reason is essentially x. If x begins to exist, if there's a sufficient reason of why. If x begins to occur, there's a sufficient reason of why. If x begins to be true, or if x is true, then there's a sufficient reason why. And that is the principle of sufficient reason. I think very well that Craig and Moreland look at these objections, and they do very well at proving them to be not so sound, and maybe not even valid. Well, they're begin to exist is saying that the universe is beginningless, and that there's an infinite regressive causes that we have a, just like the infinite regressive beliefs as to why you believe something in epistemology. This is an infinite regress of causes as to why was the bottle caused to exist, because this caused the bottle to exist. But why did this thing exist to allow the bottle to exist? Thus we have causes, a cause, a metacause, and so forth, and infinitely regressing. And just like in epistemology, where we have to either argue how there can be an actual infinite, or we have to argue some other position. Now, in epistemology, there are more options, but if you cannot say, if you cannot argue that there can be an infinite regressive causes, then you have to argue that there's a first cause of something, that there's a beginning cause. Because if you don't concede the principle that something that exists has a cause, then you have to concede to the fact that there are actual infinites. And Hilbert's Hotel, that is the biggest thing I think that Moreland and Craig have presented as to arguing against the actual infinite. The idea of a potential infinite, that's much less important. Like a potential infinite, as they have argued, is the idea where if we have this much of space, and we divide that in half, divide it in half again, and we can go. We can divide it infinitely more and try to reach something, but you will never reach that point, because you will get infinitely more close to it, but you will never reach, because it's infinity. That is potential. That is a potential infinite. But if we're talking about an actual infinite, let's look at his definition of an actual infinite. By an actual infinite, the argument's defender must the argument's defender means any collection having at a time t a number of definite and discrete members that is greater than any natural number, or more plainly, an actual infinite being Hilbert's Hotel. This is I described this earlier in the video. The idea of how he discusses all these different scenarios with this infinitely roomed hotel, where if we have a finite roomed hotel, you can have no vacancy there. But if we have infinite rooms, then there will be, and you add a bunch of guests to this hotel, you will have the same amount of number of people that you had before those guests booked their rooms and checked in. So that this is the whole idea of Hilbert's Hotel. Hilbert's Hotel, from the mathematician David Hilbert. This represents absurdity in infinity. This is absurdity in infinity. This shows that that an actual infinite existing in reality leads to absurdity. And I think that since Moreland and Craig have used the idea of Hilbert's Hotel to show the absurdity of the actual infinite, then the universe had a beginning is a pretty reliable statement. But then on the other hand, if you are a theist, I mean, if you are if you are a Christian, I guess, or a Muslim or a Jew, if you practice Judaism anyway, if you are a practicer of most religions, then there's a god or gods that are omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. And thus they are necessary beings meaning that they exist and are the cause of everything else. They are the first cause of everything that exists in SA. Or that exists now. And they are the reason for that being's own existence, like the unmoved mover, but it's the being that is the cause of itself, and that the whole idea of a necessary being and that kind of being related to God, that's a problematic notion. But the idea that if you are a Christian or a Muslim or practice Judaism, if you do those things, then you believe in a God that is a necessary being. But my real point here is that if you are a necessary being, a first cause, then that's the much like a brute fact of basic belief. But you're the being is doesn't need any other causes, and it's not contingent. It's necessary. But the problem there is that being the common Christian God, the common Muslim God, Allah, and the God of Jews, the Judaic God, that those gods, as well as gods of other religions, are necessary and the believers of those religions, I know I'm a theist. The believers of those religions don't understand the idea of a God having no beginning and no end. That is the biggest problem that Christians have in not only believing the Bible, things like the Bible, or the Quran or the Torah. The biggest problem in believing those things is that, I mean, I'm not the biggest, but one of the biggest problems is that this God has no beginning. I mean, no end is more understandable, but no beginning. This God never began, so how can it be existing right now? And if it caused itself, how does it not have a beginning? But that's also a more problematic. But what Christians are taught is that when they go to heaven, they will understand more, that there are things while we're here that we do not understand and cannot understand because we are warped, that our souls are warped in flesh, and we are, that we are in our bodies here until we die, and once we go to heaven, we will understand totally clearly everything God had planned for us and what God's use for us is, and what God is Himself in every single detail as to why and how, and every single reason how and why and what, how did God and Jesus, God and the Holy Spirit have no beginning, and yet they exist. Well, the Christians believe that they exist. And I'm specifically referring to Christians here because that's the one that I know about. I know about that because I am that. But that's my real question here. The only problem that there is with, because with Hilbert's Hotel, that is shown easily that an actual infinite is absurd, and that it cannot exist in reality. No way. But then we have to concede that there's a necessary being that is a beginningless existence, which is even more problematic. So, which is more problematic, the actual infinite or the beginningless existence? I don't know, but the Christian will say that it is more difficult to believe in the actual infinite, and will argue that premise 2, the universe began to exist, is easily believed in. But even though while the Christians believe that a beginningless existence is possible, because if a beginningless existence is possible, then if you are being really philosophical rather than religious, and being more like this, then a Christian believing in a beginningless existence while they believe in God, premise 2, the universe began to exist, might not be all that certain. But I don't know. I need to read more of William Lane Craig, because I'm sure that he has a good philosophical explanation for this. Also, one more thing. Like I said at the beginning, I have links on here that are to lectures by William Lane Craig, and he's very good a Christian apologist, and he will explain a lot of things philosophically, also, not only religiously but philosophically. And also, I have down here a channel that you should probably check out. The channel is called Thunderfoot. I have watched a lot of videos, and he bashes William Lane Craig a lot, and I want to link you to that channel, because if you are a believer in our Christian, then that's a good thing to watch, I think, because it makes you think about your faith, and it makes you think philosophically about your faith and why you believe what you believe. not just not just that you have faith, but you believe that. But and why you believe that? So yeah, I've been talking for 60 minutes of one full hour. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna leave now, and I really discussed a lot here. So I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. If I do not make a video before then.